There are many who deserve credit and thanks for organizing this summit. I appreciate the work that Senator McConnell has done. He and I have done our best to put together a fair group of witnesses. Of course, Senators Bingham and Domenici, who are so unique, both coming from the same state, being chair and ranking member of that committee off and on over the last several years. Appreciate their good work. And of course, I again extend my appreciation to those who are here from government. There are academics here, people from industry, and especially I want to thank Senator Conrad, whose idea this was, lead organizer of this summit, suggesting this is something we should do. So he's pushed relentlessly to have this done, and of course we've all watched with interest the work that he's done on a strictly bipartisan basis, coming up with some energy legislation that we'll see in the next few days. I think we've seen two diverging trends in this energy debate. One I think is very encouraging, and one perhaps not so. On the one side, as the fall campaigns heat up, we've seen energy move into a more partisan realm, with candidates looking to score points with sound bites that really solve nothing. But on the other side, we're seeing an increasing consensus that when all political dust settles, our energy challenges can't fall into political partisan bickering. That we've got to understand that the issue is bigger than any one of us, any one political party. And I think an encouraging trend toward bipartisanship is some of the things that's happened the last few days. We've seen the Gang of 10, which has continued to work on their product and move to a clean revolution in every city and town across our country. The American people demand that we do something differently. They're demanding bold new ideas and creative solutions. And I'm confident that today's panel will help move meaningfully toward that end and move away from what we have now, which is status quo. Senator McConnell, and on behalf of Senator McConnell and I, we have some business on the floor. We're in session today. We've created it so there will be no votes, but there is work that we have to do. And so if you would be good enough to excuse us after we complete our statements, Senator Bingham and Domenici, we would appreciate it. Senator McConnell?
Thank you, Senator Reid. It's great to be here. I want to also thank Senator Bingham and Senator Domenici for their leadership, and all of those of our colleagues who are around the table who expressed extraordinary interest in this. I do want to say, with regard to Senator Domenici, as we all know, he is wrapping up 36 years of extraordinary service in the Senate. He has been our energy expert on our side for a long time, and I know it must be gratifying to him, even though he will not be here next year, that the subject that he has devoted such an extraordinary percentage of his public service to is the number one issue in America. And we hate it that you won't be here next year, Senator Domenici, because you have been a wonderful leader on the subject of energy over the years, and so much of what you've suggested we ought to do, we should have done a lot earlier. Over the past several months, Congress has been engaged in this important debate. Americans are rightly frustrated over the high cost of gas at the pump and the high cost of energy in general. $4 a gallon gasoline was the tipping point, galvanizing consumers across the country and sparking Congress to refocus its energy on a problem that has been with us for decades. The seriousness of the problem and the need to do something about it soon was brought home to me in an especially vivid way during my time at home in Kentucky over the August break. In dozens of public events, I spoke to commuters, farmers, and owners of small and large businesses whose lives have been disrupted, in some cases tragically so, by the high cost of gas. Kentucky's home to about 80,000 farms. I heard about the soaring cost of fertilizer, which is made with natural gas, the cost of fueling farm equipment with diesel, and even the rising cost of seeds, which are often trucked into farms from long distance. I heard about the soaring costs from UPS, which is Kentucky's largest employer and the owner of one of the nation's largest air fleets. A recent article in one of the national papers noted that UPS drivers had been told by management not to take left-hand turns. It saves gas by cutting down on idling time. Well, the article was meant to be funny, but I assure you the employees in Louisville are not laughing. Nor are the residents in rural Kentucky, who are among the hardest hit consumers in the nation as a result of high gas prices. With lower than average incomes and few mass transit options, most of these folks are now spending a giant chunk of their paychecks each week on fuel. The average resident of Owsley County in eastern Kentucky, for example, is now spending more than 15% of his or her income on fuel, the fourth highest average of any county in the nation. But perhaps the most distressing story I've heard about is the consequences of high fuel prices from the operators of a dialysis center in Elizabethtown, who told me that some of their patients are cutting down on life-sustaining treatments because it's just too expensive for them to drive back and forth from their homes 4 times a week. These people are desperate for help. Republicans, I assure you, are open to any reasonable suggestion that will lead to a concrete, meaningful result. And it is with this in mind that Republicans have already coalesced around a simple and straightforward principle that we believe could and should form the basis for bipartisan legislation on this issue. We need to both find more American energy and use less. We know that we can find more domestic energy by means of deep-sea exploration off our coasts and by developing western oil shale deposits, which according to conservative estimates represent at least 800 billion barrels of recoverable oil. At the moment, the vast majority of these enormous domestic resources are off limits to consumers as a result of federal regulation. Republicans have repeatedly demonstrated our strong support for energy conservation measures. Most recently, we demonstrated that commitment by supporting the first increase in federal fuel economy standards for cars and trucks in decades. But it must be said at the outset that conservation alone is clearly insufficient. While all of us may envision a future in which America does not run on fossil fuels, this is not today's reality, nor will it be for many years to come. We need to be realistic and recognize that in the near term, we will still need more oil and gas. And I believe that this oil and gas should come from America's own ample domestic reserves, not from the Middle East. We cannot and should not ask people like rural Kentuckians to assume the burden of this transition when we have enormous energy reserves under our own feet, reserves that the government has made increasingly difficult to tap. Indeed, few people seem to realize that as America's energy consumption has increased over the last 3 decades, we've actually been producing less and less of it at home. As a result of government regulation at every level, America's domestic oil production has dropped roughly half of the 10 million barrels per day that we produced right here at home 3 decades ago. This trend toward less domestic energy production may have made sense to some people at a time of cheap oil. It makes no sense at a time of $4 a gallon gasoline, and most people realize that. The American people are demanding that Congress do something to alleviate high gas prices and to do something significant. Some of the proposals we have heard certainly try to make that effort, but by and large they fall seriously short. They either ignore the need for increased domestic supply or they're disproportionately meager in light of the severity of the crisis. The primary drivers of the current oil shock, economic growth in China and India, are not going away. The American people realize this, and that's why they're not likely to be satisfied with half measures from Congress. In this case, I'm convinced finding more means finding a lot more. We have the resources. Americans want us to use them, and they are exactly right. I look forward to hearing the proposals of today's witnesses. It's my hope that today's summit energizes the Senate and brings us even closer to delivering a concrete, meaningful solution to the people of Kentucky and to the rest of the American people as quickly as possible. Thank you.
All right. Why don't we go ahead? Let me make a short statement and then call on Senator Domenici to make any statement he would like, and then we'll go ahead with witnesses and follow that with questions. Let me start by thanking Senator Reid and Senator McConnell for asking our Energy and Natural Resources Committee to organize this event. Senator Domenici and his staff have worked with me and my staff to gather energy policy experts and high-level executives of energy-related industries to talk about all facets of the energy challenges that confront the nation. I know Senator Reid referred to the National Clean Energy Summit that he hosted in August, and a great many excellent policy recommendations came out of that summit. The purpose of today's Energy Summit is to foster additional bipartisan dialogue here in the Senate on how we can achieve a more secure, reliable, sustainable, and affordable energy future for the country. And obviously this is a very challenging goal. To put this in some context, in June, the Energy Committee had hearings on a comprehensive and provocative report that was put out by the International Energy Agency. It detailed a mix of technologies ranging from carbon capture and storage to concentrating solar power that need to be developed and deployed in order to meet our energy needs and reduce greenhouse gases. Transforming our economy from one based on fossil fuels to one based on clean energy will not happen overnight. It will require enormous investments in the range of $40 to $50 trillion was the estimate we heard. Our goal is attainable if we encourage private sector investment in clean energy today, if we prioritize and sustain the support for energy technologies over the long term, and if we ensure that those technologies that we do develop are in fact manufactured and deployed here in this country. So we have a great many challenges to talk about today, and I appreciate all the witnesses being here to help us understand these challenges. Let me call on Senator Domenici for any statement he would like.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I want to join you in thanking everybody that has come here this morning, obviously willing to participate in this discussion, and our two leaders for their direction, and obviously they've stated it for themselves, and we can all heed it. I myself would just like to put into perspective for a moment why we're here, why I think we're here. On May the 1st of this year, I introduced a bill with 18 co-sponsors that essentially did a number of things, the biggest of which was to open the continental shelf of the United States to drilling. That is, take off the statutorily imposed moratorium that has been existent for many years. So the first premise of that bill was to do that. The second was to proceed with ANWR, knowing full well that that was extremely controversial, and nonetheless it was on the bill. The bill also contained a proposition for converting coal to liquid. It also contained provision for removing the moratorium on regulations, on the promulgation of regulations with reference to the oil shale in the state of Colorado and Utah. About a month later, the minority leader asked me if I would change that bill to a shrunken bill. I shrunk it down by taking out some of the controversial bills, and lo and behold, on our side of the aisle, we had a bill with 44 co-sponsors. But the primary focus of it was that we would try to use more American oil. We are here today because that little stream turned into a bipartisan effort to open more of the offshore resources of America. We were astounded, I think, almost to a man or to a woman as senators to find that within 3 or 4 months of the debate here in the United States Senate about opening the offshore that we owned that the American people began to say, drill. We were so frightened of the idea of drilling that we were using fancy words like exploration. And we would say to ourselves, don't use drill, that's bad. Just make sure you use this fancy word, exploration. Well, it turned out the American people didn't care. They decided that we should drill. And up came from the hinterlands of America, drill. Up came at the Republican convention, drill, drill, drill. And now that's all we hear from our American people, is that they want us to drill and produce more of our own energy. Now, I'm not here telling you that that will solve America's problems at all. I'm merely telling you that's what brought us to this point. We are grateful that a bipartisan group of senators, we know who the leaders were, they got together as a group of 10, I think, and took this cudgel and said, we will try to put together a different bipartisan approach, but it will have the opening of some of the outer continental shelf, not all of it, some of it, and we have proceeded from that point till today. You can apply your own logic as to what this group can do or will not do with reference to that status that I have just described. That's about where we are. The group of 10 is out trying to put together senators and have changed the format of the original bills, which I did, which were partisan and admittedly so. We wrote them for Republicans, and we even put Anwar in the original ones. We didn't go across the aisle, but you all did. The Gang of 10 did. And now we are here, Senator Bingaman, not limited at all by the little historical sketch that I've given, but to hear what the experts tell us we ought to be doing to get ourselves out of one of the most significant crises we have ever had. I could have used my time otherwise. I could have tried to tell you what we have already accomplished, because it does not do my heart any good to continue to hear, or either direct or by implication, that we have done nothing, because we have done much. Under the leadership of Senator Bingaman for half the time, myself for half the time, the Energy Committee has produced an array of initiatives that are having and will have a dramatic positive effect on the energy crisis of the United States. They're in a statement I have, but I will put the statement in and say, Mr. Chairman, that I think it was more fruitful for me to state the history, because I think the history that got us here was one of saying, produce more of our own at home. That isn't everybody's wish around this table, but to put it into perspective, that is what started this momentum, and I, for one, know that the crisis is multifaceted, the solutions are multifaceted and tough to get to, and it won't be an easy achievement. But I do believe permeating throughout that is the fact that the American people have quite properly seen that if you've got some of your own resources, you ought to seriously think about using them, United States Congress. I think that's what they're saying to us. Thank you very much.